transphobic TikTokers are misrepresenting what I said and just straight up lying, because that's the only way you can disagree with what I'm about to tell you.
Straight up lying? That's interesting. This is episode 12 of Exposing Lies on TikTok.
I made a video where I proved without a shadow of a doubt that trans people are valid, and I challenged any transphobic TikToker to prove me wrong so I could show how dishonest these people are. And this man made a response video that is full of so many lies that I am going to need a lie counter to keep track of it. As Dan McKellen would say, all right, let's see it.
The entire argument is that gender is biological and anyone who is trans is just mentally unwell. This is something that the general scientific community agrees is wrong.
Yes, gender is based in biology. That's why the concept of man is formally and informally defined as adult male human, and the concept of woman is defined as...
Right off the bat, this is a lie. If you Google gender versus sex, any resource will tell you that sex is biological, gender is socially constructed. This is a lie. Put one up for the lie counter. And this is doubly fucking dishonest, because even the source that you use to define man or woman literally defines gender as something that is socially constructed and says that there can be gender identities outside of male or female.
Comes to chromosomes, XX equals female, XY equals male, and any other combination of chromosomes is intersex.
Not necessarily. XX is generally associated with females and XY is generally associated with males, but what actually determines gender is the activation of the SRY gene in the Y chromosome. So males are male.
This lie is actually my favorite because it is either a lie of omission or he is just so uninformed in what he's talking about that he genuinely doesn't know the mistake he just made. In the video that he's responding to, I brought up the fact that some people are born with XY chromosomes, but their bodies present female. That is called Sawyer syndrome. And his theory is that your SRY gene is what determines your gender, right? Basically, what that means is if you have a Y chromosome, when your SRY gene on that Y chromosome activates, it turns your body male, and that's what makes you a man or a woman. And he claims that people with Sawyer syndrome, because their Y gene doesn't activate, this means that they are actually women, right? That's what he's saying. But the funny thing is, I mentioned another disorder that is conveniently missing from his video. The opposite of Sawyer syndrome is when females present male. This is XX testicular difference. The majority of times that this happens, it is because an XX gene receives an SRY from a Y gene somewhere around down the line, which according to LJ Truth is why these people present and identify as men. But the funny thing about this disorder is 20% of the time, there is no SRY gene transfer. We actually don't know why this happens, but we know for sure that 20% of the times that this happens, it is not because of an SRY transfer, which means what he's saying is wrong. And for anyone who doesn't understand, I'll break it down simply for you. His hypothesis is that SRY genes is what determines your gender. But there are people who do not have the SRY genes for men, which means that it cannot be this that determines your gender. Now, because this man is so dishonest, he might say, well, that's such a small number of cases, that doesn't count. But that's not how science works. Let's imagine we live in a world where 0.001% of the population is only born with one arm. And my hypothesis is that people are intelligent animals because we are born with two arms. It does not matter what small percentage one-armed people make up. The fact that they are intelligent but lack an arm means that my hypothesis cannot be true. And if there are biological females who do not have the male SRY gene but still present male and act like a man and identify as a man, then that means that it cannot be the SRY gene that determines your fucking gender. Which means that you are either lying to people or you don't know what the fuck you're talking about and didn't know this was a thing. But I'm just gonna assume you don't know what you're talking about because that is what your video screams. Let's get back to the debunk.
When males present female, it's called Sawyer syndrome. They grow up and live their entire lives as women despite being biologically male.
Yeah, that's completely wrong. People with Swyer syndrome aren't males presenting as female, they're just females with XY chromosomes.
This one is both a lie and a misrepresentation. I literally checked with somebody who has a biology degree just to make sure that I had this point right. People who have Sawyer syndrome's bodies present as female because their Y gene does not fully activate, but they are still very much males. Because to be male, all you need is an XY chromosome. That's it. These people's bodies present as female, which is why they are referred to as females, because it's just way more convenient to do it that way, but they are still male. Because you know what's something that females don't have that people with Sawyer syndrome have? Testicles! People with Sawyer syndrome also cannot go through a female puberty without the assistance of hormones because they are not female. They are males who present female. They are referred to by medical professionals as female because it makes more sense to do it that way instead of referring to their chromosomes, but in fact, they are still male despite what their bodies look like. They are not females with XY chromosomes. They are males whose bodies did not develop in the way that a male's is supposed to. This is another lie. Put it up on the board.
A crackpot psychologist called John Money conducted an experiment.
It's kind of ironic that you mentioned John Money, the sick and twisted doctor who used someone with a medical condition to experiment on and justify his theory of gender identity. Because here you are trying to use people with intersex conditions who are completely unrelated to those who choose to identify as trans as a way to justify your gender ideology. All while making claims that are eerily similar to claims that John Money himself made.
This lie pisses me off for how dishonest it is. The reason I brought up John Money's experiment was to prove the fact that you cannot force somebody to live as a gender that they aren't, which is not something that he mentions at all. John Money's assertion is that gender was learned and not innate. My claim is that gender is innate to who you are as a person and cannot be changed by outside factors. John Money's assertion was that gender was primarily learned, not innate, meaning that you can teach somebody to live as a different gender, which is literally the opposite of what I claimed. Again, this is a fucking lie. Either it is a lie or he had no idea what John Money actually believed in. I literally stated in the video that your gender is what you just gravitate towards, and you see other people around and how they express their own gender and take in aspects of that and apply it to your own sense of gender, but that your own gender is still going to be your gender regardless of what it looks like. This man does not give a figgity fuck about the truth. If he did, he would have stopped saying this nonsense back when Micah, who is a biologist, schooled him. Like I said before, transphobes cannot actually stay transphobes if they listen to reason or logic, and they must lie and misrepresent things in order to support their ideology. Because again, let's go back to his SRY gene point. There are people who exist as men without the SRY gene, but you claim that it is the SRY gene that determines your gender. If you really gave a fuck about the truth, you would have to admit that this is wrong, because I just showed you the proof as to why this is wrong. But you don't care about the truth, so you won't do that. We should really be calling you LJ confirmation bias. Because not only did you straight up lie several times in this video, but you straight up ignore the fact that most scientists disagree with you. Your brain does not instantaneously download new information. You simply listen to the things you like and full stop. And there's actually proof of this in your video. Let's look at the clip.
Who identify as trans are those with an incongruence between their biological sex and their perceived gender identity. There's also a mental disorder known as gender dysphoria that's classified in the DSM-5 and is described as a sense of unease that a person may have because of a mismatch between their biological sex and their gender identity. I don't think that's a coincidence.
You bring up gender dysphoria to imply that trans people have a mental illness, when gender dysphoria is literally just the result of being forced to live in a way that does not reflect with how we feel about ourselves. I think it's funny that you didn't bring up how gender dysphoria is relieved by living in your gender identity. You didn't even bring up the fact that cis people can get gender dysphoria too. There are tons of cis women who feel like they look too masculine and that gives them anxiety, and they take steps to correct that by doing things like taking hormones or getting breast augmentation surgery or facelift or other kinds of plastic surgery, BBLs. But you only brought up gender dysphoria as it relates to trans people to try and prove that we're mentally ill, when not only is this something that everyone can experience, but it in and of itself does not mean that being trans is a mental disorder, only that not living in your identity gives you a disorder. So this is a misrepresentation of the truth. But I know that this isn't going to convince you or any other transphobe that they're wrong. No matter how many times you are definitively proven wrong, you will not change your mind. Because the simple fact is, it is not about the truth. If it were, you would have admitted you were wrong a long time ago. Like I said before, trans people are valid, and anyone who argues otherwise is misrepresenting the truth or a liar.